The founder of the business that I work for now taught me a fantastic small saying, which became a little bit of a toolkit for me, which is kind of like, framing things as, look, it's my personal preference, but it's my professional responsibility. Because sometimes my personal preference might be to be lenient on somebody, but my professional responsibility is to make sure that they hear the right feedback if they're not performing, right? My personal preference is to never fire anyone, ever, right? To never make a retrenchment, to never have to let somebody go. But my professional responsibility is to the business, to the shareholders, to the bottom line, and to create the environment where everybody can succeed. But if they're not succeeding or the business isn't succeeding, then that is my primary kind of commitment and responsibility.
Hello. Hi, welcome to Building Better Leaders podcast with Seok and I. And today we have got a guest. So before we introduce our guest, we want to kind of like give you an update about what this podcast is all about. So every episode we will be exploring one particular leadership tension. And for this round, let's see what leadership tension we're going to explore. And today we have got Ben Milne. So a little bit about Ben. So how we got to know Ben is very interesting. So Ben got hold of our book, Leadership is Not Automatic. And we actually had a little section where you can drop a testimony or something nice if you would like to be able to say it. And he did, right? He took the effort to boot up a computer or something or just write. And I would like to read out what he wrote, which was really, well, for us it's heartwarming and reassuring. So he said that it's so relatable and real, I literally couldn't put it down and finish it in one sitting. The coaching conversations are an incredible alternative, an improved lens to view the situations and broader solution set that can be applied. Thank you for writing this book. I was like, oh, that's really nice.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So we are running this in conjunction with the 1-year anniversary of the book, and we thought, hey, why not invite Ben on our podcast and also learn something with him as well, because he currently holds interesting position and also of his background as well. He has been in this part of the world in Asia for the past 15 years at least. So we can definitely learn something from him. So with that, we would like to get Ben to introduce himself a little bit before we jump into the questions for the day. Over to you, Ben.
Great, thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here. And once again, thank you for writing the book, because we wouldn't be here today if you hadn't, I guess. So introduce me. Hi, I'm Ben. I'm the CEO for Billups Asia Pacific, but more importantly, I'm the father to 2 girls, 18 and 14, and the oldest is about to leave me to go to university, so I'm slightly heartbroken and incredibly proud at the same time. And I run a team of around 70 people across Asia Pacific. We're a managed service technology company in the out-of-home space, but we're not here to sell our products today, we're here to talk about people, right?
Very good. Okay, thank you. Would you want to kick off?
Yes, I have a curious question at the top of my mind that I want to ask Ben. So Ben, when you first read the Leadership is Not Automatic book, what really caught your attention or resonated with you? For you come with wealth of experience, leadership experience. So for someone who has led the organization, what really caught your eye?
So I think for me, right, the reason why I literally couldn't put it down and I genuinely read it in one go was the journey. Right? The pacing was brilliant, right, in the book, but the journey, I felt like I was reading my story, right? Throughout the last 27, 28 years that I've been working in advertising, I've constantly kind of every 3 or 4 years, so I should write a book about all the experiences that I've had. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't thought about that through the lens of coaching and people development. I've thought about it more about the just wild and hilarious stories and drama that have happened in our fantastic advertising industry. But I started out in this business 27 years ago. I didn't even know that advertising was an industry. I mean, that was the fault of career counselors at school and at university, I guess, because I studied psychology. I was always fascinated in the human mind and why people do things. But I kind of accidentally fell into advertising in a very, at the very bottom of the ladder, right? So my job was to make everybody a cup of tea when they wanted, to run the client schedules, and to send posters from A to B to make sure that clients' campaigns happened. And I mean, it was a brilliant founding in the business because I really understood the nuts and bolts from the ground up across the whole horizontal on how everything comes together to make it work. But over that 28-year period, you know, having been constantly curious and fascinated and always asking questions, you know, I guess I've had great leaders and great bosses along that journey and great mentors who saw that spark and cultivated that and gave me the opportunity to climb up the ladder. So, you know, in that time, I've gone from the very bottom to, you know, leading the global kind of out-of-home practice in terms of the channel that I've been responsible for within one of the holding companies, and then moving into a specialist agency in the space. So for me, taking it back to the book, you know, the journey that the guys in the book went on from, you know, starting out in the industry through to, although I have never founded my own company, maybe that's a part of my epilogue, you know, but that really stuck with me. I felt like I was almost, you know, in an alternate parallel universe. If I'd been working in social media and influencer marketing, I felt like maybe that would have been my journey. So yeah, I think that's what really resonated. It was just so relatable, right? It was so, all the anecdotes and the kind of the real world examples was, I could just immediately, I could juxtapose it with people in my journey and think, oh, that's like this or like that or like this. And so it just made it, yeah, super consumable.
Thank you. Wow, it's wonderful to hear that you have an avatar who is called Sam in a parallel universe. And I
That's
think that is
interesting.
what how we want to write the book. I think that was the purpose that we hope to serve, is to get people to relate to maybe not the whole journey, but certain parts of the journey. Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like the element of you don't start out one day as nothing and then become a leader. You're built bit by bit by bit, experience by experience, encounter by encounter, learning as you go. And just, you know, I think demystifying it for people, right? You know, I think sometimes not junior people, it's the wrong word, but people starting out in their career kind of, you know, look to leaders as, you know, thinking it's some finished product. I mean, it's not. None of us are finished. We're all working on ourselves constantly, you know, but it's just in that moment in time, the sum of all the parts of the experiences we've had and the people that we've encountered along the journey and the lessons they've taught us, right? And the book takes you on that journey. You see people growing throughout that.
Yeah. I think this is like leadership is similar to like parenting, since you have two goals, right? It's like, you know, it's like, it's not something that once you get the name card that being promoted to a team lead or a people leader, or you attend a 6 months or 1 year kind of executive programs and you now become a finished product called a leader. It doesn't work like that. It's just like the day you have your first baby, you are a parent, promoted, but it's always a work in progress and kind of never gets there, I feel. Personally, I also have two children, so I can relate to a lot of that.
I think I hope I'm a better leader than I am a parent.
We all hope that have the same wish.
Yeah.
So yeah, what has been an idea that stayed with you today?
So I'm very quick. I have been, you know, all of my life, and I kind of see connections and make connections quite quickly. I talk quickly. I'm quick on a tennis court. I'm just fast in a general sense, and I like fast. But for me, the kind of intentionality around the kind of the autopilot piece, right, for me, really kind of stayed with me. You know, I think I could identify with, sometimes we make quick decisions and we feel comfortable with that because we're happy to make a quick decision and we think, well, it might not be right, but I'm making a decision quickly, and that's better than sitting on it and prevaricating. But I think learning to pause a little bit, that might be a defensive reaction, that, you know, having instinct and harnessing the instinct are two kind of slightly separate things, right? So have the instinct, but take a pause, wait for a second, take on other data points, other people's opinions, and then kind of, you know, be intentional with the way you use your instinct or your decisions. For me, that kind of stuck with me quite a lot. And it's funny, you know, in the last few years, I've changed bosses, right, for the first time in quite a long time, and my current boss, you know, he uses the word intentional a lot, and I think the book helped me to really kind of see why that was a benefit rather than just a word, if you like, on a page.
I'm just curious to know, in terms of your transformation journey yourself, what was your leadership style before compared to who you are today?
So I think if I go back earlier, I think I tried to emulate other people, copy other leaders, be like a boss you see on TV, or be like a manager you saw you read in a book or whatever else. And it sounds, and I'm sure that you've probably had this conversation with many people, and so I'm not going to break any kind of new wisdom or ground, and it sounds ridiculously simplistic, but honestly, I've just become more myself. I'm more me now than I was when I was fresh out of university and actually hadn't been molded by anyone else, had no role models, had no templates, because I had fear back then, 20 years ago, when I first became a manager of one person, the responsibility of having that, but also the desire to want to do a good job managing somebody because you worry about how your manager will see you as a manager, etc., etc. The fear made me behave in ways that weren't necessarily as authentic as I can be now. And it's still hard, right? It's really hard to be, it sounds stupid, but it's hard to just be yourself. Be authentic, and because in life, especially in business, as a leader, you don't exist in a vacuum. I'm a leader of one team, but I'm a member of other teams, and that team is full of leaders of other, so there's lots of leaders that are my peers as well. And so to be authentic, I have to sometimes challenge them, and some of them can be quite forceful, or they have very different styles, and sometimes my, whatever you want to call it, inner chimp or whatever, kind of goes back into that fear mode. Oh, maybe I don't know anything. So I have to remind myself, hey, you've been on this 20 plus year journey. You've been through all this experience. You've become who you are. Back yourself, right? Be authentic. So I think I've just become actually more myself. And if you took me of today back to 28 years ago and showed to that person, he'd probably say, yeah, that's me, right? That's completely how I show up at home. But that person wasn't showing up at work in that way.
Yes, I think all leaders can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we kind of assume a role, there is a professional capacity that we are trying to fulfill, right? But yet there is a personal capacity of who we are. And I think in one of our first episode, we actually talk about that leadership identity. That there is a constant tension for sure.
Yeah, it's very hard, right? We're all defined by our past, right? So to me, I'll always be, that boy that grew up in a suburb of London near Heathrow Airport, whose friends still live there and have never traveled the world, even though I've lived in 5 different countries. There's an anchor that pulls me back to that and makes me feel like I'm not worthy, or I don't deserve this, that whole imposter syndrome thing. And you've got to always show up with your kind of confidence and everything else. But actually underneath it all, I think that, I think if most leaders were honest, everybody has their insecurities, everybody has their kind of, their inner voice that's telling them they can't do something, or they shouldn't do this, or they should do that. And if we shared that more, my leadership view is that we should just be as radically kind of transparent and vulnerable as possible, because I'm comfortable in my experience, I'm comfortable in my position, and I'm going to share who I am, right? And if that's a problem for somebody or another business, well, then that's fine, right? But this is who I am, and this is how I want to work, because that's the only way that other people are going to feel like it's okay to be themselves, and it's okay to have those fears, or to have those kind of concerns for themselves, or or even if they have massive overconfidence in themselves, that's great. Just acknowledge that, be self-aware to it, right? Yeah.
Well, I for whatever reason, I think I would be able to hang out with you for hours and hours because of your amazing self-awareness that you have, and the language that you use, and it's very, like you said, very authentic, very real. People would like to follow people who are real and not, performative. Yeah, probably there was a time that the kind of leadership, like the magnanimous sort of leadership, existed for sure. But I think in today's day and times, yes, of course you need to put on a performative hat in certain times, but also to be really self-aware, to know when to be yourself. So that's great. We're just wondering, is there still any sort of difficult decisions that you still have to make these days when it comes to people management?
Yeah, so look, this is a really interesting one. So, yes, right? Short answer, yes. But yeah, there's kind of, if I go back to COVID, right? So I work and specialize in a channel which is, primarily talking to people when they're not at home, right? So it's bus stops, bus shelters, sports grounds, train stations, shopping malls, etc. That world has always had an increase in audience day by day by day because the population is growing, right? And with the exception of a few countries, that is a kind of unstoppable force. So the circulation figures, or of out of home, have always just gone up. COVID was the first time in modern history that suddenly there was fluctuations in those numbers, drastically down, as everybody was locked up and told to stay at home. As a leader, as a manager at the time, it was possibly the most difficult 2 years that I've ever managed teams or business, because there was no playbook. Absolutely nothing like this had ever existed. I was in the UK at the time. I'd moved back to the UK for a few years, and there was a mechanism called furlough that had been invented for the service industry, but within the business community, nobody had ever heard of this word. We didn't know what it meant. It effectively meant you could put staff on, you could send staff home. They didn't come to work. The government would pick up 80% of their salary, and they'd remain employed, but they wouldn't do anything. So we had to learn what this meant. We had to learn how to use this new tool to kind of try to protect our business and our teams and our people for the long term, knowing that what we were living through was this short-term, aberration, that obviously things would round back. I mean, we all spend plenty of time out of home nowadays, in fact, more so than ever, right? So, but our business had fallen off a cliff, right? We couldn't afford to keep everybody employed. We had to make some really big decisions about how we managed that. And one of the biggest and most difficult decisions that I had at the time was really kind of, how do you choose? How do you choose, who gets put on this kind of temporary pause, if you like, which is hugely damaging to their self-confidence, hugely damaging to their sense of purpose. Yeah. They're living through this really uncertain time. Are they going to come back to a job or not? And who gets to stay and man the ship in, during this emergency stations kind of period? And, I had very different views to my manager at the time. I was at a different company. I kind of, possibly I'm a bit too socialist maybe for the business community at the time. But my view was that the leadership should take the biggest cuts, right? The leadership should take big temporary pay reductions. Leadership should even put themselves on furlough for 4 out of the 5 days a week, because what was there to manage? What decisions were there to be made? Nothing. There was no business for about 6 months. So we could have dealt with that in a day a week. But there was a kind of, in the holding company world, there was kind of a different mentality, I guess. So I didn't win those decisions. And it's not I won't say it's a guilt, but I'd say, I have a lingering kind of question around how things may have worked out differently if the decisions that I'd thought of on how to manage a team through that crisis had been kind of implemented, rather than, I think, more the set of default kind of conditions that ended up existing, where effectively the kind of, the more kind of exec and manager levels were all kind of, put on hold and, made little difference to the bottom line, made big impact to their lives, made a big difference to our team morale and cohesion. And so I think that was one of the most difficult decisions, and well, it's not a single decision, but set of decisions that I've ever had to manage through.
I'm curious to ask, like, when you had a set of criteria that you want to use in this decision making, what was the positive intention behind that you were trying to uphold?
Yeah, so for me, I think that, ultimately what I wanted to do was, so my fundamental belief was that business would bounce back, right? That we would recover, that COVID was temporary. And I wanted to ensure that by the time we were coming out of the end, there was a maximum opportunity for everybody to still remain employed. If that looked different, like 3 days a week rather than 5 days a week, but still 50 people in the team rather than 15 people in the team at the end of it, I would have rathered that situation, because I think for me, it was understanding that I wanted to give everybody the opportunity and the choice, right? Like, ultimately, people have put their kind of livelihoods into your hands as a manager, into a company, and your responsibility is to them and to their families, right? For hopefully for the long term, as long as their loyalty's there. So for me, my decision-making criteria was, how do we keep the maximum number of people in full-time employment? Even if that full-time employment looked different at the end, they then had the choice on what they would want to do, rather than what a lot of companies did, which is effectively reduce their workforces temporarily, and then found when it recovered, there was a huge problem filling vacancies because they treated people so badly when they made the cuts. Nobody wanted to come back and work there, and yet once it bounced back, suddenly you needed all of those staff. So, that was really kind of my strategy, theory, and decision-making criteria through that.
Okay, wow, thank you for sharing. Because I think that the tension I saw in this was the balance between the power and responsibility. Yeah, it's like as leaders, you have to, and you strongly believe that, therefore, as leaders, we should set examples, and to be the role model. And that comes with the responsibility and putting back the ownership or the agency back into individuals' options. Yeah, and therefore, it's more like a partnership kind of approach. That's true. Wow, and it ties back to the earlier tension you talk about you as a person being yourself, and of course it's like as you mature and you become more be yourself authentic, that is the word you use, and at the same time is to be able to be a better leader. Yeah, so it kind of ties everything together in terms of it goes back to what is the values that is driving all this. Yeah, and whether as a leader you're also operating within the system, and therefore individual leader values versus the organizational values, there's also another set of tension that overlays and interplay. Yeah, wow, okay. That must be really difficult. I know, I mean, me as a HR practitioner, I've conducted a few rounds of termination and retrenchment or dismissal, and it never gets easier, even though no matter how many times you kind of go through it.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think for me, I've been through far too many of them for my liking as well. For me,
I guess it's the agency industry we're in.
yeah, it's the agency. It's also look, right, the founder of the business that I work for now taught me a fantastic small saying, which became a little bit of a toolkit for me, which is kind of like, framing things as, look, it's my personal preference, but it's my professional responsibility. Because sometimes my personal preference might be to be lenient on somebody, but my professional responsibility is to make sure that they hear the right feedback if they're not performing, right? My personal preference is to never fire anyone, ever, right? To never make a retrenchment, to never have to let somebody go. But my professional responsibility is to the business, to the shareholders, to the bottom line, and to create the environment where everybody can succeed. But if they're not succeeding, or the business isn't succeeding, then that is my primary kind of commitment and responsibility. And if I can walk into a room and feel like I'm authentically, even if it's awful things that you have to communicate or to do or whatever, and none of us ever want to be there, right? As long as you feel like you could do that every single day, and that hand on heart, you're saying the truth, you're not doing things that are, for nefarious purpose or for anything else, right? That you genuinely have given that opportunity to somebody then at the end of the day, that's our kind of jobs, I think, as managers, is to do the hard things as well as the fun things, right? It's great to give out awards and to exceed your expectations all the time, but it's not life, right? Not always.
Nicely put. Thanks, Ben. Taking it to a close, I'm just wondering, how would you advise young managers these days when they are being promoted from a manager, being promoted from an individual contributor to a leadership position?
I think, so first thing I would say is, I think they have it so much harder than we had it, right? I think they have to contend with hybrid working from home, distributed teams. They've got to deal with the disruption of technology, especially AI. I can only imagine what when somebody brings you something now, is it them or is it their AI, right? Where's their thinking versus their machine's thinking, right? We want people to use AI. It's a very powerful tool. But we don't just want to know what their AI thinks, we want to know what they think, right? And how they use it. So I think young managers coming up today, in many ways, the managing humans part of this hasn't changed since the last 2,000 years, right? Where our physical animal evolution is an incredibly slow process, right? We're not a different species to the one we were 2,000 years ago. So actually, from that perspective, I would say to them, lean into everything that's been written, read this book, and there is a lot of understanding in the area of kind of managing people, and you should tap into all of that. I think in terms of, though, managing through the complexity of the modern age of technology, I think that there is no playbook for any of this, right? So, don't search for the answers, because you're the generation that are making the answers. So test and learn and be intentional. To go back to some of the point, be very intentional. Try this. If that doesn't work, try something else, and help the kind of hive mind write the playbook for how you manage teams in this new age. I mean, my personal kind of plea to them would be very simple. Trust your gut instinct, right? I'm not to get a bit paranormal, but I'm a big believer that we're all interconnected, and also as individuals, our bodies and our minds are absolutely interconnected. And I believe that kind of today's paranormal stuff is going to be tomorrow's standard science and understanding. I've only ever gone against my gut instinct once, and it's the one decision that I can't say I regret it, because I wouldn't be sat here today if I'd made a different decision. So I can't regret it, but I can say that that's the one decision that goes over and over and over again in my mind, day in, day out, for the last 10 plus years. What if I had done this? What if I had done that? So, trust your instincts, verify obviously with others and data, but your instincts are there for a reason, right? And you got to back yourself. So it goes back to what you were saying earlier, right? Be yourself. Easier said than done. Take time for yourself as well. I think as I've got more senior, I have more agency in how I spend my time. Right, I'm not judged on my 9 to 5 and showing up. I'm judged on the delivery. I'm judged on the outcomes. I'm always there for my clients. I'm always there for my team. But you know what? If I need to go and have a swim for half an hour at 1 o'clock to 1:30 to clear my mind so that I can make better decisions that afternoon, then I'll do it. Is that so easy when you're a junior copywriter or you're an account manager? Not so much, right? So, we get a bit of a luxury in a kind of more, but I think that the way the world's changing, I think people are more empowered to take a bit more agency over their own life, look after your body and mind. It all works together. It sounds a bit kind of yoga retreat, and I'm not that kind of person, if anyone who knows me, but it is important. It is important.
Well, I think the younger workforce today do have the agency to decide to go for a gym run at 1 p.m.
I think they do, right? I think they do. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing that they do.
Okay, we're gonna pivot to this segment called Office Hours, where basically we kind of like turn the tables. You can ask us any questions or any leadership questions that you may have, and we will try our best to be able to answer it.
Okay, cool. Well, look, so I guess, and building on kind of all my story that I was just sharing, the latest chapter in my book, if you like, I've stepped into a new role in a new region. My first time at a C-suite level, there was no leader for our Asia Pacific region when I took the job. So I didn't have anybody's trust to kind of inherit, had to build everything from scratch. So kind of from my perspective, when a leader is starting really from zero like that in a new vertical, a new region, a new business, or whatever it might be, what's the quickest way to earn the title doesn't give you that authority, right? What's the quickest, is the whole point of the book, right? So what's the quickest way to earn that authority? And I guess the other kind of part to that question is like, if you've got a toolkit and answers for how to earn it, what's the fastest way you can lose it as well?
Okay. Seok, you want to try this?
Yes, I can, because it kind of straight away brings me back to my earlier days where I left a large enterprise as a HR exec, and I took on a HR manager role to set up HR from scratch. So I was the first ever HR that they ever hire. And the company by then was already 60 headcounts. So that's when they need to establish certain systems and all this. So I feel that after that experience of 4.5 years, I feel that everybody should really be in a startup position of any sort, be it in a startup company or set up a new department from scratch and all this. But back to your question, Ben, is that what is the quick way to earn that? I remember is that you being the first person, first of all, you need to understand then the environment doesn't know what you can do and what you cannot do. They will throw you all sorts of things. I remember that my first week, everybody come to me with certain claims, whatever annual leave entitlement, all this kind of admin stuff, which I know that as a HR, I'm way more than this. So I want to do strategic stuff. I want to influence and set up systems and build systems and not just entertaining requests. So I took the first 2 weeks to really kind of like nail down what I think I can really contribute at different level, meaning strategic level, operational level, and the functional administrative level. But at the same time, it took me a few months to really be intentional about understanding why certain things work in a certain way. Yeah, so I always believe that there is no, whatever that existed is being allowed. So for example, if one person is allowed to dominate a meeting of 10 people, it's because 9 other people allowed it to happen. So that one person did not behave in an accidental manner. So I think I went around to really understand, why are certain things done in a certain way and what was the rationale behind and all this. So before I really kind of like put a stop to it or build certain boundary or, re-establish the rules of engagement, I would advise all leaders who are taking on a first-time startup kind of environment to really understand this. Yeah, if you're setting up a function, like in this case for you, you do, right? And if especially if like they don't have an APAC role, I think it's really to carve out and define the rules of engagement and the boundary, yeah, and the purpose of it, the value proposition basically. Yeah. I think the way to lose it is contrary. I mean, on the other end of the side is that you kind of just judge everything and think that everything is just stupid. So I think that's the fastest way to do it. So there's always context. It's like appreciating art, or music. It's about the context, yeah. That's my take. Yeah, Kausern?
Okay, so I've got a story for you as Seok was talking. So in my last job, before I started my own company, I was in an influencer agency company. And of all things, I am not an influencer, so I clearly do not know much about the industry at all. I came from a digital marketing background, even though they say it's the same thing, but it's a different thing altogether because it's content marketing and so on. So I joined the company, and it was about 50 people strong in that company. And that particular company was actually pretty well established in terms of the brand name. People know who they are, people know the founders and all. So taking up the lead role, CEO position at that point in time felt really daunting. Not because, one is because I don't quite know much about the industry at all. The second thing is also with regards to the age group. So I was in my almost hitting 40s at the time, and they were like in their early 20s.
You
So
change
the
your HR
moment
statistics, yeah?
I joined them, right, the median completely shifted, right? Yeah. So, and even though I had the authority and all, but yet I still feel not prepared at all, right, going into this. And I remember speaking to one of my mentors. So I think one of the things I wanted to highlight is that it's important to have some kind of mentor or someone who has somewhat done something like this. So this person will be able to very quickly give you the shortcut or the shorthand to things. So I spoke to him, and he said one thing to me which I remember to this day. He said to go slow to go fast. So I was like, what? Can you repeat that again? Go slow to go fast? Then he said, yes, go slow to go fast. So I said, can you please expand on it? So there's certain things you need to go fast, for sure. But when it comes to understanding people, processes, systems, and so on, take your time so that you can go faster later. So go slow to go fast. So I said, okay, well, that's interesting. So then I devised a plan that when I went in on day one, I wanted to meet up with every one of them. So there's 50 of them. It took me about 2 months to kind of have one-on-one with them, to just understand what are they going through, to understand what is the climate, to understand what needs to be changed, and so on. So all I did was just to ask questions and just to listen. Ask question and listen. So the questions that I asked them were things like, so how long have you been here? What do you see that needs to be that needs to change? And so on and so forth, right? And the final question I asked them was the one that I felt changed everything. And the question was, if you were in my position, what would you change? So I thought that was really, really helpful. And then they started to take agency, they started to take ownership, they started to really, felt that they were being cared for. And at the time, of course, clearly there wasn't any sort of AI recording whatsoever. So I had to literally write down every single thing that they've written down on an Excel sheet, every name, every line, what they said, and so on. And if I could fulfill things for them in a very immediate way, like for example, if somebody who has been shortchanged of promotion for the longest time, I will do it for them if I can, right? So I'll quickly do a 360, ask everyone around them and say, hey, is this person worthy of promotion? Immediately I could do it. But I was accountable to whatever that they say. So I will go back to them and just say, like, hey, these things that you asked, I remember those things. I can make changes to A, B, C, but D, F, I'm sorry, it will take some time. So at least they know that I was listening to them. And at the back of all these things, I was being asked to turn the company around as well. So at that time, the company was deeply in red, and they wanted to turn it around. They give us a certain time to turn it to black, but with the condition that there will be no fresh investments that's going to be put in. So the owner said there's no fresh investments, no new products, no whatsoever. Work with whatever that you have. That's all. If you can't turn it around within a certain timeline, they will shut everything down. So to me, that's where I can resonate with you a lot. If I can, I would try not to fire anyone, right? But so all I had was people-powered technology. So that's why I wanted to kind of like meet up with every one of them, understand what needed to be done. And it was so helpful because there was wisdom in the room. whatever that they said actually helped me to map out the entire turnaround journey for the next 1 or 2 years. So did we turn around within 1 year? No, of course we didn't. It took us about 2.5 years to turn around. But I had the story because we were trending towards turning around. And it was really, really helpful to be able to manage the board of directors. And true enough, when we turned around and so on, and everybody was elated, and we didn't have any new tag whatsoever. All we had was just us. And it was unheard of at that time because these guys, they were like first jobbers, and usually first jobbers, their lifespan is about 2.5 years or even 2 years. And these days could be even shorter. But they were with me, the core team was with me throughout the 8 years I was there. And it was their first job. So, and they're all young people. I think this picture here, that's them, where we were celebrating something there. So I was very grateful to them, And so that was, to me, was the fastest way I could think of at that point in time to be able to turn things around. There wasn't playbook whatsoever, but that one phrase that my mentor told me, go slow to go fast, that was really, really helpful. I mean, being a very structured person, I asked him, so what does it mean? What are the steps and so on? That he was like being the Yoda-ish kind of, you figure it yourself, you will know what to do. I was like, what? Then I had to, yeah. So that was great, and really happy that they turned out that way. And to the question of how it would totally kind of like flip things around, it would destroy things very quickly, is that number one, if whatever that I say I wanted to do it, I don't do it, then immediately the trust towards me will fall, right? So the competency is really important as well. I need to be able to deliver what I say I need to deliver. So competency is really important, I believe. The second C is actually character. So I need to have integrity. So again, whatever that I say I want to do, I need to do it. So competency, character. And the third one, which is, it sounds a little bit iffy-jiffy, but actually it's not, is to be able to care for them. And there's a saying that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and that's what it is, right? When I say care here, I don't mean kind of like, oh, I'll care for you, that kind of stuff, right? But in essence, like what Seok said about parenting, there are times that I need to be hard on them to be able to stretch them, right? Because it's for their good. And care here includes challenging them as well. So if I were to come across as competent, I run the ship with high integrity, and the third thing is to be able to care for them, which includes challenging them, I think they will take a bullet for me. Yeah. So that's kind of like how, to answer your question, that's how I did it.
No, I love it. Go slow to go fast. I think my team are either going to love you or hate you when all the meeting invites go in their diary over the next few months.
Okay. So we'll come to a close. Thank you very much, Ben, for spending the time with us, and I really appreciate this conversation. I think, again, if I'm down in Singapore or when with Seok, clearly we would like to meet up with you and have a drink or something, right?
That'd be great.
Okay, all right.
Thank
you, Ben. Thank you for spending time with us.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.